Thank you, Erin, for this introduction, and also from my side, I welcome you in this project event. So I assume that at least part of you joined a support activity for the first time. So therefore, I will give you a short overview of the support project. Let me start in the presentation mode. Yes, there it is. Support is the acronym of Supporting Uptake, Integrated Pest Management and Low Risk Pesticide Use. When we focus on the objectives, I have to mention that the key element of the support project is focusing on the decision-making process about the adoption of IPM. And we apply in this project the multi-actor approach. We started in 2023, so we have entered we're halfway the last year. And that's also why we are in a stage of the project in which we presented the results. And so this webinar is also one of these activities. So we have 4 objectives. The first one is building a stakeholder ecosystem in which we involve all kinds of stakeholders such as farmers, advisors, supply chain partners, policymakers, representatives of NGOs in our activities. Second objective, and I think this webinar is specifically focused on this objective, is collecting an inventory of current and future IPM tools and assess the impacts on pest control efficacy, economic performance, and the environment. And this tool will demonstrate how we have realized this objective. The third objective is focusing on the decision-making process thoroughly, focusing on what are the barriers and opportunities farmers, advisors, and other stakeholders experience when they want to apply IPM and make the crop protection strategy more sustainable. So we analyze in this specific objective more the decision-making process in more detail. And the last objective regards proposing policies and private sector strategies for enhancing IPM adoption in co-creation with relevant actors. And as already mentioned, we do this in a co-creation process. So we have developed a conceptual cycle, which we start with the assessment of the current uptake of IPM measures. Then we focus on how can the impacts of crop protection and policy effects of IPM measures be assessed. That information feeds also into understanding the barriers and opportunities farmers experience when applying IPM. And on the basis of this information, we propose policies and strategies with the ultimate goal that the impact will be a higher uptake of IPM measures. And as already mentioned, we do this in a co-creation process at several stages during the project. So we have in this multi-actor approach focused on 3 separate layers. So the first layer is the national crop clusters, in which we have a combination of a case, a crop, and a country. And we make use of those national crop clusters, especially for getting feedback on the approaches and also for data collection. The next level is, and we have selected 9 specific crops in countries for community of practices, in which we apply the multi-actor approach more thoroughly at several stages of the project. And also the final layer is the network of practices consisting of the different community of practices at a larger scale. The last slide I want to present is that we have applied this approach on 8 different crops, representing a variety of characteristics such as perennial and annual cropping systems, focusing on fresh products and products produced for the processing industry, and also with a geographical scope. And each crop at least in 2 countries represented, and some at more countries. So for example, potatoes is represented in 5 countries. And each of those crops and specific countries serves as a community of practice. So as already said, we have entered the last year. So hopefully we will be able to present a lot of useful results. And I think this webinar will also be dedicated to present especially one of our tools we have developed in the course of this project, the IPM Self-Assessment Tool. So this is in short what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan, for this indeed brief introduction to the support project. This webinar is dedicated to the integrated pest management self-assessment tool that has been developed in the course of the support project. And who better to introduce what the tool is, how it has been developed, what you can do with the tool than one of the people in the lead of the development, that's Vera Krause. Vera Krause is also a member of the support consortium. She works at Julius Kühn Institute in Germany. And the Julius Kühn Institute in Germany have been in the lead of developing the ISAT tool. So Vera, I give it over to you. I don't see you for the moment, but I guess that will come.
Thank you for your presentation. I will share my screen. Hello everyone. Today I'm going to present you the tool that we have developed in the framework of this project. I'm going to briefly introduce you to the tool with some slides. Then I will do a live demo, and then we'll have just some questions, short questions. But bear in mind that we have, by the end of the webinar, half an hour for discussion and more.
Sorry, Vera, I can't hear.
Really? Do the other ones hear me?
I can
hear you, Vera.
Okay.
I hear you, Vera. So
okay, let me know otherwise. Okay, so I can start. Johan already introduced the project, so a bit of this is already repeated, but we are part of work package 1, and the concrete task of our work package in the project is to increase the capacity to understand the impacts of existing versus future crop protection strategies by developing an IPM monitoring framework to assess the impact of IPM on the environment and the farm economy. And for this precise objective, we have developed the IPM assessment tool. We call it here the ISAT, IPM Self-Assessment Tool. The tool is designed to use at the farm level, and it can be used on 1 year or multiple years. The target users are farmers, advisors, or researchers. The main purpose of the tool is to help visualize and compare impacts across environmental, economic, and social dimensions, and therefore it's aimed to support decision-making by farmers and advisors. We have validated the tool across 8 different crops and 10 countries, the ones that Johan mentioned, these 10 countries that are members of the support project in Europe. It includes more than 500 active ingredients and more than 800 commercial pesticide products. So the indicators that the tool will consider are the total cost per hectare, the emissions per hectare, the frequency of pesticide application, the number of pesticide products, as well as the number of active ingredients, the total pesticide load, which is the main focus of the tool, and the special feature, let's say, which is composed by the pesticide load for ecotoxicology, for environmental fate, and human health. But I will explain each one in detail. So the data needed for the implementation of the tool, let's say the inputs that the farmer or the advisor will give to the tool, are all the field measures or operations done on field. That includes, for example, the dates where an operation was done, which type of measure was that? Was it tillage? Was it a pesticide application? Also, type of machine is very important. This refers to the details of the machinery, like the power of the engine, the working width. And for the pesticide application, it's very important to know the commercial product that is being applied with the dose applied and the percentage of surface applied. This is probably quite relevant to, for example, spot spraying, because the data we need from the commercial product is the active ingredients. To calculate the greenhouse gas emissions, we use an existing model called MILA. It covers operations such as tillage, sowing, mechanical weeding, fertilization, pesticide application, and harvesting. And for this, we use the German fieldwork calculator. This estimates the diesel used based on the machinery details and inputs. So the included emission sources that we calculate in this tool are the diesel combustion that comes from the use of machinery, the diesel and machinery production itself, like what are the emissions coming from the production of the machine, the emissions from the seed production, and the emissions from the pesticide production. And for this, we are using the Eco-Invents database, meaning that for certain pesticides, we can calculate how many emissions come from the production of the pesticide itself. And the costs are calculated in a similar way because we use as well the German fieldwork calculator that integrates technical detail with economic parameters, and it estimates cost per hectare for the same operations: plowing, seeding, pesticide application, also fertilization, harvesting. And the cost components are machinery and labor cost, as well as the pesticide product cost, depending on how much is used and the unit price. So the economic inputs, the technical inputs needed to calculate the cost are machinery details, like I mentioned, the working with, the energy use, as well as economic factors such as purchase price, service life, repair or maintenance, and labor, such as operator, wage, and time. But as an input itself, what we need is the type of machine, and then the tool will calculate the purchase price, let's say the service life, and so on. And here we arrive to the special feature of the tool is the pesticide load. We developed these indicators specifically for the tool. This indicator is based on other approaches, for example, the Danish PLI, and it builds on existing approaches to improve it and make it more appropriate to the European context. It evaluates environmental and health impacts of pesticide use across EU member states, and it's based on the pesticide property database and the biopesticide property database for toxicity and substance data. We have included here more than 500 active substances, and we incorporate 41 hazard metrics. So the pesticide load comes from the score. Each active substance has a score from 0 to 1.5, meaning 1.5 very high risk, very risky substance, and 0 very low risk. And we calculate the pesticide load as follows. We multiply the score of each substance by the dose applied. So the higher the dose, the higher the pesticide load. And the pesticide load itself is composed by 3 sub-indicators: pesticide load phase, ecotoxicity, and human health. So the 41 hazard metrics have their own units, of course. And in this case, I'm showing the human health metrics. For example, we have acute oral toxicity for mammals or acute inhalation toxicity for mammals. So the first step to arrive to this indicator is to standardize all these metrics that come in different units to a score that ranges from 0 to 1.5. For this, we use reference values. And in the case of categorical values such as is it carcinogenic? Yes, no, or possible. We just give 3 possible scores. But most of the metrics are actually following this shape. They have many points, and we use reference points to draw a line. And here we have the total active substances that we include, separated in different pesticide groups. Different to other approaches, it can happen that an active substance doesn't have data for all the hazard metrics. And we are not going to assume a zero risk if there is no data. So in a realistic way, we try to deal with this is that we give the group average mean for that metric that is missing. So for example, for a herbicide that is missing data for a given metric, we will replace it by the average mean of the group it belongs to. However, we aim to keep only hazard metrics that have a high data coverage, meaning higher than 60%, to avoid an issue of over-representation of certain substances. So this happens only in some cases that they don't have data, and we have to do this in this way. The environmental phase has 11 metrics that consider persistent in soil, in tissue, in water, and volatilization potential, like, for example, how likely is this active substance going to persist in soil, or how likely is it to leak to groundwater or surface water? And each hazard metric will give an idea of the risk to that particular compartment. And the way we do the weights is that they are not all equal. Some will contribute more to the pesticide load, and we calculate this by doing calculated weights from calculated in the first place the correlation between them. So very correlated metrics will not have the same weights, of course. And for ecotoxicity, we have 20 metrics. We can see here they are divided by aquatic ecotoxicity and terrestrial ecotoxicity. In aquatic, we have fish, aquatic invertebrates, aquatic primary producers, and in terrestrial, we have earthworms, birds, mammals, bees, and beneficials. And here are the full hazard metrics that we are considering. In this case, we opted for a worst case approach. What does it mean? It's that, for example, for a given substance, if it has two values for fish, acute and chronic, we will keep the value that is the worst case. This is a precautious approach, and it also allows us to use more metrics that otherwise we wouldn't be able to use. In the case of bees, all these metrics like mason bees and bumblebees, in other approach, they would have fallen out, but by doing this worst case approach, we are able to include them in the analysis. And lastly, the human health sub-indicator contains 11 metrics that I showed you before. And in a similar way, we calculated the weights. So not all metrics contribute in the same way to the pesticide load. So in comparison to other pesticide risk assessment, the pesticide load includes more environmental and health metrics. We are now including 41. Previous approaches had maybe 15 or 20. In this way, we are trying to include more metrics and to extend the scope of our analysis. We are including the worst case approach for ecotoxicology metrics. And we're dealing with no data in a realistic way by using pesticide group average instead of assuming a no risk when we have no data. I already explained the statistically significant weighting method. And most importantly, we are including also pesticides now from the biological pesticide property database. This methodology is going to be published in a peer-reviewed journal. So this will be open for everyone to see. And now I will show you in the tool this case study of Interweek in Germany that we developed for the project. It's important to understand that we are dealing here with the same hypothetical fields. And these fields, we simulate 3 different scenarios. One is the state of the art with 3 herbicide applications. Tillage, 1 insecticide application. This state-of-the-art scenario is intending to reflect like the business as usual, the most common practice, although we know this varies farmer to farmer. Then we have a second scenario, which is IPM, no tillage. As mentioned, there is no tillage happening on the ground, and there is one less herbicide application. And a third scenario, which is IPM with tillage, that avoids all herbicide application and also reduces one fungicide application. And the main purpose of the tool is to compare these scenarios or any other scenario and see what are the differences and what is the most risk-driven measure. So now I will jump to the tool. This is how it looks like. Everyone is able to create an account. I already have an account for this example. As first step, the user selects a field. We have here a map of Europe. In the example that I already chose, I just picked a random field, but the user can pick any other field, just zooming in the area of interest and just clicking on the field, and this will save the field. At the moment, I have to say we are not using the geolocalization of the field in the current status of the tool, but this is work in progress, and the next features will include, for example, weather and other data relevant to the location. So the first step is to select the area, select the field, and then we jump to application scenarios. I have already saved a lot of scenarios, and they are in German, but it's no problem because the tool is in English now, and I'm just going to show you how you could do it normally. And you pick the field and you can give a name and you search for the crop, and you can input the yields and the year. I will leave it as it is because this is just an overview. And here the user is able to input all the measures done on the field, starting from sowing, the procedure, for example, is the detail of the machinery. There are a set of options that a user can pick. And once we have the procedure, then there are a set of options for the technique. These are the machinery details I mentioned before. These are relevant to calculate the cost and the emissions. And then for all the measures that we will input, there are some details that are set as defaults that of course can be modified, such as the diesel price and the hourly wage. And most importantly is the pesticide application. So for example, here again, we have a set of different types of machine, and the user gives the date of application and the percentage of area. In this case, I will leave 100%. Drift reduction can be input as well. And when adding a pesticide application, one has the option to add the commercial products. For example, we have all these Roundup. I always give here an example of very common used commercial products. We have, as I said, 800 commercial products that are sold in Germany. We do not have all the EU-wide commercial products, and we will explain why. That would be the ideal case. But if the commercial product is not there, it's also possible to search for active ingredient instead. And all the options will appear. Again, we have more than 500. These are all the used in EU, so they should all be covered by the list behind this. And then very importantly, the user gives the application rates and adds application by application. I'm not going to do it, of course, but it's just an overview of how the procedure looks like. The same with fertilizer. We do not have it in detail as what type of fertilizer is because we are focused on IPM and on pesticide application, but it's possible to add a type of fertilization done on the field, mainly to calculate the emissions from the machinery and the cost. Non-chemical control measures are very important as well. These include, for example, mulching, harrowing, and other type of measures. Again, always there will be an option to choose the type of machine, the wide and the engine. We have also manual procedures and tillage options, as well as harvest and catch crops and alternative procedures. This includes like drones and robots, but this has to be input by the user. We cannot calculate this, the emissions of this, because we just don't have the methodology for that. And once the user inputs all the field measures, it will look like this, something like this. And then we jump to analysis. As I mentioned, weather, we do not have yet the weather data for all EU. So we leave this as it is for further improvements that we are trying to develop. And in the example I wanted to show you, for one scenario, the overview will look like this. We have the number of pesticide products applied, the quantity, the expected yield, the frequency of pesticide applications. This is work in progress. And here it's possible to choose all the pesticide products that were given and their active ingredients to see how it performs, and the total cost and the total emissions. And we also have the options to see one by one how they disaggregate. So in the case of pesticide load, we have here all the pesticide products that are input in the state of art. Here we have the herbicide, as well as insecticides and fungicide. And each active ingredient has a risk score. This is a pesticide load score ranging from 0 to 1.5. Here we have an interpretation. If it's high, it's low to moderate. And at the same time, this pesticide load is disaggregated in phates, aquatic organisms, terrestrial organisms, and human health risk. So the user is able to see how it performs in these three subcompartments. And because the score is multiplied by the quantity, the final pesticide load that we are looking at is the product of multiplying the score by the applied quantity. So this will be very important to identify what are the substances that are more problematic, let's say, which are the substances that are driving risk very high. In addition, it's possible to click on the active ingredient, and this will open a pop-up window in case more information is needed from the pesticide property database. For example, for this active ingredient, it will detail all the results from the hazard metrics and give more information, references, and so on. Regarding the cost, we have here disaggregated again each field measure. For example, this application on this date has this cost that comes from the procedure cost, that comes from the inputs, workload expenses, and so on. So it's possible to see the disaggregation of this cost calculation and see where it's coming from. In the same way, you can do the same with the greenhouse gas emissions and see where are the emissions coming from? Are they coming from the machine, from the diesel consumption, or from the input materials? In the case of this herbicide, we see that these emissions come from the production of this herbicide. And the main idea of the tool, once again, is a comparison of the scenarios. The idea is not to see absolute values, but to see how they relate to each other, how they compare. By clicking compare, and once I have selected three scenarios, the one that I mentioned before for winter wheat, we're able to compare it as a table that we can export, or we can see it in a more visual way as plots. And for example, the state of the art which is the yellow one, is the one that, as expected, performs the worst in a sense of the riskier ones for the environment. As we can see, it has the higher pesticide load and the higher cost and the higher emissions. We assume the yield constant. This was an assumption, but of course the user will modify the expected yield. And for example, if we see which one was the pesticide in the state-of-the-art scenario that was the most concerning one, we can arrive to the conclusion that it's this herbicide because it has the higher number here. And this is a riskier herbicide that's being used in this scenario. Other scenarios that have a less risk, like the IPM with tillage, is avoiding all of the herbicide application and is successfully bringing this number down. So this is just to show you that by knowing which are the active ingredients that are more problematic, then the user can take decisions like, should I replace this application with a less riskier substance, or should I avoid this application and do another field measure? So I think I'm almost, 25 minutes, almost done. And now I will go to conclusion. So yes, the languages of the tool at the moment are English and German. The user is able to compare different crop protection strategies and take decisions that best fit their goals. What are the limitations? The greenhouse gas emissions that we are calculating here are not considering soil emissions. On the other hand, we are assuming linearity between risk and those applied. And also, we are not calculating additive effects from pesticides. So no synergies are modeled in this tool. So for further improvements, ongoing updates of the pesticide property database and biopesticide property database will allow a more complete pesticide load analysis, because these databases are updated constantly and they are adding more metrics and adding more data. On the other hand, we also want to incorporate the synapse model, which Jörn, I think, will mention in his presentation later. And lastly, we also want to incorporate a crop sequence indicator. These two aspects are very relevant to the location of the field, and that's why the location of the field will be very relevant to assess the pesticide exposure risk and the crop sequence indicator. But as I mentioned, Jörn will mention this later. Thank you very much. I'm happy to hear some questions, or at the end of the webinar as well. We have the half an hour.
Thank you, Vera. Not an easy task to present in 20-25 minutes. The outcome of many months or even years of work. So if you have questions at this stage, we have some time for some specific questions. You can just raise the hand or use the raise hand function in the tool. There was one question in the chat, Vera, a question from Andreas. The question was why in the ecotoxicity indicator you use different weights for different indicator species. Why are some weighted higher than others?
Yes, this is based on correlation analysis. So species that are very highly correlated will give less to a total weight, let's say. These are very highly correlated. So it doesn't make sense to give them the same weight as the other metrics because they're usually very correlated. So that's the answer. It comes from the correlation analysis.
All right, so Andreas, I hope that is an answer to your question, unless you want to reply.
If I may, yeah.
Yes.
Thanks a lot. First of all, for the excellent presentation, very interesting project, and also for the response, which I think is of course makes sense. I just wonder. We know that for the bees, that there is a lot of data on honeybees, but not so much data on bumblebees and mason bees. So what if basically we are lacking ecotox data for some of the indicators? So would that be then taken up, or would let's say the honeybee, for instance, as an example, could that basically be given then attributed then the weight of the others? Thanks.
Yeah. Well, you're right. There is very few data on other bees, bumblebees, mason bees. So we are using the worst case approach. Let's say for one active substance, we will have only one score for bees. And depending on how much data we have for that active substance, it will use the data available. If there is no data for bumblebee or mason bee, it will use normal bee data. And if there is data for all of them, it will use the worst case, meaning the bee that is most toxic to. That's how we deal in the worst case approach. The weighting is a little bit tricky in this sense. Here, I just gave the easy picture because in this case, of course, if we use only honeybees, it doesn't mean that it will have a low weight. We have to calculate this iteratively depending on which set of metrics we are using in the end. Here, I just gave the average. But in reality, what we do is we calculate the weight for each set of combination of worst case. So that is to ensure that we are not giving a very low weight to a honeybee. I'm not sure if I was clear.
Yeah. If I may, another way. So just I don't want to dominate the discussion, but I just wonder, basically, if I understand correctly, then basically the total ecotox value will be then across the different groups of organisms will be then the average. So let's assume a substance which is highly toxic for bees could still be given a moderate ecotox value if it is harmless for other substances, or is this would you give it a high ranking for ecotoxicology if it is performing bad on any of the groups? It is just the question: is it the worst group of organisms, or is it the average across different groups of organisms? Which, for instance, in the case of, I mean, it's not what we are discussing here, but in the case of neonicotinoids, for instance, they had been phased out because they had been extremely problematic for a particular group of organisms, whereas they have had very low ecotox values for others. Thanks. And then I stop.
Yeah. So if I understood correctly, maybe I'll do a more complete example. So let's say for one active ingredient, because we take the worst case approach, we will take the worst case of aquatic primary producers. Let's say it's this one, algae, then chronic fish, and then chronic for aquatic invertebrates. So in this way, it's precautious. And for birds, we will take the worst case and the worst case for mammals as well. So we have here 7 metrics, 7 worst case. So to calculate the weight, we'll calculate the correlation of these this picked 7 hazard metrics. Depending on that correlation, we calculate the weight. So we are not able to say what is the weight that hazard metric will have, because it depends on the set of other metrics that are chosen. So this iterative approach will calculate the weight for each substance separately, because it's using a different set of indicators. Is that answering your question?
I haven't yet completely understood whether you're averaging then across the 7 groups or whether you're taking the worst of the 7.
No, we are not using average.
So you're taking the worst performance in
each group, we take the worst performance, and then we just
But
to
across groups,
arrive
I mean,
to
across
the
groups.
final pesticide no ecotoxicity, we will add them.
Okay, they're added. Okay.
Ah, yeah, sorry.
So this adding is like averaging.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Vera. I'm going to close it here. I don't see other hands at this stage, but you will be with us until the end of the webinar. So if there are other questions in the meantime, use the chat function or use the raise your hand function at the last half hour of the webinar. The webinar is titled IPM in Practice. So we have not just been developing this tool, we have also been using this tool. And this tool has been used in 11 countries in participatory ways with farmers, farm advisors, researchers to evaluate current IPM strategies as an inspiration to think of possible future IPM strategies. And we have someone from our consortium, Ole Hingst, also from the Julius Kühn Institute in Germany, but with a different role in the project than that of Vera. Who has been using the tool in Germany with that specific purpose in mind. And he's going to tell you a bit about what he did and also the type of feedback he has been receiving from the users of the tool. So Ole, yes.
So can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see the screen. You might just have to put it in presentation mode and then we see it bigger. No, now it's gone.
It's still not
Yeah, that's another mode. But
another mode. Sorry, I just changed the
Mhm.
screen. Hopefully now.
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Hello, my name is Ole Hinks. I'm also working at the Julius Kühn Institute, and I'm part of the community of practice. I'm the leader for winter wheat and potatoes, and I was mainly involved in developing the plant protection strategies and work together with the stakeholders. And in the following minutes, I will show you some results from user evaluation about the IPM self-assessment tool by farmers and advisors. So how do we get our feedback? As mentioned by Johan before, the project is organized in different groups. So in national crop clusters and community of practices, a network of practices, and some other groups of people who are involved in the value chain of winter wheat and potato, and which are familiar with plant protection. In different workshops and online events with different stakeholders, we demonstrate and evaluate these tools by and in the following we have some results of the feedback from farmers, advisors, and scientists. We developed different strategies and scenarios of plant protection, and as shown by Vera, and we got feedback through questionnaires and interviews by the stakeholders and participants. I will start with the strengths of the ISAT tool. So we've got the feedback that the tool in general is user-friendly. So the interface is similar to other software, for example, farm management software. We normally start with choosing a area, so the field in our case, and then linking different measures to this field, and then we have the possibility to evaluate this. The tool has a high level of functionality, so especially annual crops can really easy to be mapped. A little bit difficult is it with perennial crops such as olives. So we got the feedback from colleagues from other countries in our consortium. This belongs to the different machinery, labor, and processes which are used in these cultures. A last and very big strength is it's a platform for comparability. So it is possible to compare different scenarios and strategy like shown. And it's now the user has the possibility to evaluate this by himself without a big research project. For sure, it's a simulation and it relies on the data you put in, but it had the function of comparison, which is quite new. Now I will tell you something about the practical limitations. So the data entry is really time consuming. This belongs to the big amount of information you need to process these calculations. It could be possible that we put a choice of presets. This would be enhancing the usability because depending on the culture, mostly the same measures are taken to cultivate them. Also, the tool is not designed for the daily use. It's a tool to evaluate and develop strategies for plant protection. This is not a tool to see what is my work for tomorrow. Also, we cannot or we don't have every real world situation in our tool. This means that also not every machinery or not every practice is in our tool and cannot be simulated and calculated in our tool. And last, we have not every product which is used by the farmers is in our database, even though every active ingredient with this legal in Europe is within. And this is a really key point because the selection of the product is key for evaluating the strategy and also calculating the risk. Herefore, a standardized product data base would be significantly improve the data entry and also the user friendliness. Then I came now also to our opportunities for improvement, which we got as feedback from our participants. So one and the most important feedback would be a integration of an interface with a field record book. So farmers are usually using some kind of farm management software. They are anyways entering data of management practices every day in their management software, and an integration with our tool would be really helpful and would be very easy and enhancing the usability of the tool. Individual feedback would be that we add some residue retention times of pesticides. This would serve long time assessment and effects of the use of pesticide. This, on the other hand, needs a lot of larger amount of data to calculate these effects. And at last, there's also some improvement or opportunity for improvement in the explanation of the index and the color coding. So the indicator, and like everything Vera told before, it's quite complex and requires a great deal of explanation. So sometimes warning colors like red convey the impression that something is forbidden or prohibited, which is not the case. Rather, it's intended to clearly indicate the availability of alternatives and can show, okay, maybe here is some space for improvement. Now I came to the conclusion and the outlook. So the tool is a preliminary step in the development of new strategies for reducing the use of pesticide. It has a great opportunity to evaluate and also see your strategies, how they perform. Nevertheless, it is not a completely picture of the real world, so it's still a simulation and a calculation of the risks. Also, a standardized product database for pesticides which are legal in Europe would be very helpful for on the one hand for the users, so they can easy enter their product. On the other hand, also for us to calculate the risk going out from the products used. Like Vera already said, it's an application for interested parties. It's is possible. So every interested farmer, advisor, scientist can register and can use the tool and can also try all the functions, and we would be happy for some feedback. And last but not least, it's a basis for evaluation of measures by stakeholders. So this is also the opportunity for them to compare their strategies and yeah, reducing pesticides and getting better for the future. And this was already my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and yeah, please feel free to ask questions.
Thank you, Ole, for this testimony of your experiences in working with this tool with stakeholders in your country. And indeed, you also mentioned some feedback from other countries, such as the current difficulty with perennial cropping systems. As I, for the moment, don't see hands raised, but don't hesitate to raise hands. Yeah, I perhaps wanted to ask you a question. You mentioned yeah, let me first say I see a lot of similarities in terms of feedback with other decision support systems at farm advisor level. It's the more real world realistic you want it, the more data you would have to input yourself as an individual user, and then there's a trade-off. Indeed, this interoperability with other tools that you're already using. You don't want isolated separate tools for every individual decision on your farm. So I see that coming back. You mentioned it's a tool possible for farmers, advisors, scientists. Perhaps looking already ahead at the last presentation, in terms of further steps, do you see any of these groups that we should focus on, or maybe slightly differently, would the further development of this tool be different if it would be really targeting farmers or advisors? Do you have any ideas on that?
I think in general, the development is not particularly only for one of these groups. All these groups are interested in reducing pesticides or identification of hazardous or risky pesticides and maybe substitute this ones. But at the end, I think what you already also said, it's time consuming. So I think the people who are really interested in this, or who have in general a big interest in this topic, will use it. And others who see this as some kind of extra work, or work which is not directly beneficially to their output, will mainly not use it until it is possible to use some kind of farm management software, which I mentioned, where all this information you need to calculate your risks are already entered, because this are obligation by the European Commission anyway. So yeah, this is one thing I can think of.
All right, Jörn, you wanted to pick in on this discussion?
Yeah, maybe just to give some additional answers, and maybe it becomes more clear after my presentation. But I think you asked if we would develop the tool differently if it's a pure use for farmers. And certainly you can say you have to simplify everything and reduce the burden of input data if farmers want to use it, because that's really the bottleneck, that now you have to enter and you have to take half an hour to enter one application strategy. And I think no farmers would do that. Scientists, they have time, they can do it, and they're interested. But I think that's one really big step we have to go to make it into a farmer usable tool to really simplify all the input data. And I hope I can, in my presentation, I will give some more clearness to that.
All right, so thanks so much, Jordan, also Ole. So that's perhaps for everyone else in this webinar, some food for thought to come back at the end, right after Jordan's presentation. But now we move to Rui Catarino. Rui Catarino is external to the support consortium. Rui works at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. Vera has presented the tool, has presented the pesticide risk indicators that she has been using in the tool. Rui at JRC here also working on, as I see here, a harmonized biodiversity-relevant pesticide risk indicator. So I give you the floor or the screen, so to say, to present your most recent developments in that area. So Rui, over to you.
Right. Good afternoon. Can you hear me well? Just
Yeah, perfect.
yeah.
Yep.
And can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you,
Okay.
and the presentation is in presentation.
Good. Ready to go. So yeah, once again, good afternoon. My name is Rui Catarino. I'm from the JRC, the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And as you just mentioned, I think I would take a slightly different perspective from the previous speakers. So moving from a bit of a farm level and zooming out to national, EU, and maybe even global level. So I will now present some of the work that we are conducting towards precisely, as you said as well, a more harmonized and biodiversity relevant pesticide indicators. But before moving into this more technical part, let me first recall that the EU has already an important basis for harmonized pesticide risk reporting. So the Sustainable Use Directive, or the SUD, that was adopted a few years ago in 2009, was actually a very important step in this direction, because it created the legal basis for a common EU approach to monitor the pesticide use and risk. Then 10 years after, the Commission introduced two harmonized risk indicators, so the HRI one, that I think most of us are familiar with, that looks more into pesticide sales weighted by 4 different regulatory categories for each of the active substance. And the second one, the HRI2, looks in the different lenses, so looks at the emergency authorizations that are granted by member states. So with no doubts, these indicators have their own limitations, of course. I will not discuss them here today, but I think it's important to recognize that they have been useful over time, because they have provided this simple but harmonized signal at the EU level. And at the same time, so this said, over the last years, there have been requests to move forward, to move towards indicators that are more relevant for biodiversity. And this has come out from several policy developments, but as well from the European Court of Auditors. And now, if we want to look a bit ahead, there is, or this is where the picture may start to change, because now with or mainly with 2 new EU data systems, so the statistics on agriculture input and output, the SAIO, and the FSDN, the new version of the FADN, this may help to create some conditions for a next generation of pesticide risk indicator. So, and this is important because now the question has moved also beyond the EU context. Now, this is directly linked to the international monitoring under the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, adopted back in 2022. And last year at the COP16, this framework was technically updated. So now it includes 27 headline indicators that parties, including, of course, we, the EU, and its member states are expected to use in their national reporting. And just for reference, the 7th national reports were due a couple of months ago. And here, well, we have to be fair and to say that many parties were still in the process of preparing data and building up the necessity or the needed capacity to the reporting. And now the next key milestone, it will be the 8th national report that is due in 2029, where here we hope a stronger participation and a more complete reporting is also expected. In the meanwhile, so between 26 and 29, there are intermediate reporting periods that once the methodology of the indicators are ready, parties can also report. But what I wanted to say here is that the question is no longer whether, but how we, including of course the Commission, together with other partners, can support this implementation in a practical way. So, but here today, among the full set of targets, I will focus on target 7, which is all about reducing pollution to levels that are not harmful to biodiversity. And more specifically, target 7B or 7.2, which indicates or states that by 2030, parties are expected to reduce the overall risk from pesticides by at least 50%. And to support this target, there is one indicator that has been endorsed as the headline indicator 7.2, which is the ISAT, or the Aggregated Total Applied Toxicity Indicator. So the methodology for this indicator is already quite advanced, but is still being consolidated within the FAO expert group. And we are expecting that the final version is to be published around this summer or maybe a bit before. I will go into the methodology in the next slide. But before, let me just say that this is precisely where the support by the Commission becomes important. And this is done through the European Sub-Regional Technical and Scientific Cooperation Support Center and the related knowledge hubs, where we, when needed, of course, will support European parties, not just member states, but of course, including our member states with the practical application of this methodology. And for this target in particular, and this indicator, I am the GRC contact point. So now moving to the technical side of ISAT, which is very similar to what was presented today. There are some differences, as I will show, but it's very similar to the PL Ecotox that was presented just a while ago. So as you can see here in the formula, the ISAT converts active substance sale or use, if we have data for such, into a toxicity weighted quantity. So instead of looking only at the mass of pesticides sold or used, this mass is divided by the RTL, the regulatory threshold level. Then these harmonized RTLs that we actually need to collect it, and so far they will be provided by the PPDB, so the Pesticides Property Database. I will come back into the RTLs in a few slides. But just to say in simple terms that for the same amount of pesticides, as you can see, the lower the RTL, the more toxic the substance is for a given non-target group. And so therefore, the higher it will be its contribution to the ISAT. And this calculation is done, and this is important because it's done independently for each of the 9 non-target groups. And these are pollinators, birds, mammals, etc. You can see them on the top right of the screen. And why this is important? Because the same active substance can create very different levels of pressure depending on which group we are considering. The final output of the indicator is expressed as an index, but it's an index that is country specific. So it's specific to the baseline of this country. So the indicator here, it's mainly designed to show the trajectory of each country over time, rather to rank countries against each other. Now, in practice, the calculation will produce or produces separate indices for each of the 9 non-target groups. Each group is then normalized to a baseline value of 100, and the overall ATAT is calculated as the mean of these 9 group-specific indices. So basically, while the aggregated ATAT, so the ATAT gives this broad picture, then we can look at the group-specific indices to explain or to try to explain what is driving this overall picture. And now a key point of ATAT, this is a big difference from what we have seen in the other indicators, is the way that it is aggregated or how the aggregation is handled. Because here we set a floor of 50, applied to each group index before aggregation. And the aim is to make that the overall indicator to be as non-compensatory as possible. So in practices, it means that we try to prevent that improvements in one group from compensating for poor performance in another group. So there is this floor of 50 as the minimum. So the RTLs, as I have mentioned before, these are a key component of the ATAT methodology. And for each active substance and each non-target group, the RTLs are derived from ecotoxicity endpoints that include both acute and chronic endpoints. And these are the common ones, LC50, EC50, NOEC, etc. And of course, if we want a comparable ATAT reporting, we need, of course, a common toxicity data. And that reason is really important. And it matters because if different countries use different toxicity values, the trends, the results cannot be compared because can be very much different. So to have an harmonized RTL is not just a technical detail. It's actually a prerequisite for a global comparison. And this is where the PPDB becomes important because it provides this common data source that can support, or hopefully will be able to support, a global and comparable implementation. So now, passing to the results. Well, not really results, but more preliminary results, because as I have said in the beginning, the methodology is not yet fully consolidated. So let's use this more as an illustration, and also to show what a national report could look like. And here I just want to stress that these results are preliminary and are really used just to show the type of output that could be produced. And France is used as an example because active substance sales are publicly available. So what you see is in this plot here is the ATAT for France, where your x-axis show the years, y-axis show the annual ATAT index. The black line is the year-to-year evolution, and the blue line just a simple linear trend. And for this example, the series, they were normalized between 2011 and 13, but the official ATAT reporting for the FAO CBD, it will be 2011-2012. so 10 years of for the baseline. So what do we see here? First of all, the first thing is that despite this clear annual or year-to-year fluctuation, the overall tendency is downward. So this suggests, I would say, a progress over time in reducing the pesticide-related toxicity pressure. But a very interesting point is that the plot shows a very sharp drop in 2019. So first, let's recall this is sales and not used. So, and this drop that we can see here is basically linked to a national fiscal policy that happened, or that farmers anticipated this change in 2018. So they bought much more product that year than the years before. And then, of course, reduced the purchases in 2019 by using existing stocks. This is just to say that how the indicator can itself calculate this sort of events. And now, on the right-hand side, the figure shows the same logic, but broken down by the 9 non-target groups. And here the message is, once again, I think very clear, is that pesticide pressure does not evolve in the same way across groups. For example, we have the terrestrial arthropods and aquatic vertebrates showing an increase in pressure over time. But we also have pollinators and birds showing a decrease over time, which is very likely linked to the withdrawal of neonics back in 2018, I think so. So this disaggregated view, it's very, very helpful because it shows where the progress is happening, but also where additional attention may still be needed. So in summary, I think that having this sort of reportable output, a national trend combined with a breakdown by ecological or non-target group could support a nice policy narrative. But when needed, one can also go a step further. We can now look which active substances are contributing to a specific group or to the trend of a specific group. And what we can see here illustrates this for pollinators. On the left, it is shown the evolution of some key active substance that includes 3 neonics, but also others such as the abamectin. And this is important, or what is important is that these changes in this substance are linked or reflect the pollinator index in the observed changes in pesticide pressure. So this type of analysis also helps us to move from this broad view to something that is more actionable and interpretable. So looking ahead, this could also support target monitoring and eventually some regulatory follow-up. And now, but before concluding, which will happen in the next slide, I just would like to briefly summarize what we are doing here in-house. So we are actively working on 3 areas that I will show now, that I see them as quite complementary. The first one is the work that I presented, so the supporting member states and parties, and this includes developing tools to calculate the ISAT and generate comparable outputs. Then, although I didn't go into detail here, we are also working on improving the statistical basis behind the HRI1. And thirdly, this is very important for the coming years. As I mentioned at the start, the EU data sources that will become available, so especially the FSDN, this could support this next generation of indicators. As you can see in the table below, and the links are provided also on the bottom, within the FSDN, the plant protection products will be collected at active substance level in the sampled farms. And given the representativeness of the sample, I think this could provide a much stronger basis to understand pesticide pressure across farms, across farm types, sectors, and production systems. So, but without any doubt, there is still a lot of work ahead of us to achieve this goal. And now to conclude, I think the first message is not really new, of course, for us, but I think it's important. The current policy indicators are useful, but they do have limitations, and therefore we need indicators that are more relevant, more biodiversity relevant, and also comparable across countries. And this is where ISAT can, I think, play an important role because it's anchored in the CBD GBF monitoring framework. So at the same time, I'm fully aware that the implementation, it will not be straightforward. This is true for ISAT, but also for other work streams, or for the other work streams that I mentioned, because this data, detailed data on active substance is needed, and confidentiality rules remain very strict. So looking ahead, we will keep the support of the parties, or for the parties, especially for the 8th national report, and we will try to make the best possible or to use in the best way the upcoming EU data. And that's all for me. Thank you. And yeah, please do not hesitate to raise questions if you have them. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you, Rui. As you just said, if there are questions, please raise a hand or start talking. People are quiet today, much more than at our previous webinar. Although I do see a hand, Jörn, and then there is a second from Johan. So Jörn, you're first.
Sorry, the microphone was off. Yeah, thanks a lot, Rui, for this nice presentation. And I have as you said, we jump now from the field or the farm level to the national level. But looking at your indicator, do you think it makes sense to also implement that in a way we were doing that now with the pesticide load indicator or with the pesticide load on field level? I mean, and my interest is if we would really calculate both indicators on a parallel level, how do they correlate? Because the input data is the same. Mm-hmm. So there should be some correlation. Otherwise, we do something mm-hmm. wrong with our indicators.
Yes. Thank you, Jörn. Well, first, I think they should be definitely implemented. But what I would like maybe to underline is what you mentioned related, you asked if this makes sense. So one of the issues I think that was showed by Vera today is that the limit of 1, I mean, the way that the indicator is presented, there is no real sense behind it, right? 0.8 is more or less good, 1 is bad, more than 1 is very, very bad. And to the implementation, especially in a framework such as the FSDN, we need to find a way that is more interpretable for the farmer, for the user. And I think this is more, where the problem lies. And of course, speaking about the FSDN, we have the problem with the baseline because FSDN will become available in a couple of years with the reference for 2025, but there is no data behind to to construct the baseline. So here we have to think a bit more about it.
Okay. Thanks.
I hope I
Thanks.
have answered.
Number 2 is Johan.
Thank you, Rui, also for this good presentation. It's also always interesting to see what kind of developments are ongoing on the same field. And I have more or less a comparable question as Jurgen, but I asked it in a different way. When you compare both methodologies, there is also always a field of overlap when you look, I think, in the measurement of the toxicity, for example. So that means that we always have to ask ourselves, are these way of calculations consistent to each other? And from that point of view, would it be desirable and feasible to search for cooperation in this field? So although we serve different goals, for example, policy evaluation at member state level versus application or choice possibilities at farm level, to work at consistency in methodology and the availability of data in a way that we say, well, we have different tools, but at a basis where possible, we make use of the same harmonized methodology.
So, and the sorry, Johan, and the question then is?
The basic question is it from your point of view desirable and feasible to put efforts together? So when we have availability or possibilities to elaborate on the ISAT tool and you're working on the ATAT indicator, that we say, well, let's join efforts and work on a consistent methodology for elements which are overlapping.
Okay, so first, of course, I think that collaboration is essential, and that's key. We have a clear mandate for the ATAT now. More than that, maybe I can give the floor to Andreas to go more on the policy, if Andreas is still here, to go more on the policy side of the question, because I mean now our mandate it's really on the ATAT.
Given that, I might skip you, Per, first, and then go to Andreas, and then come back to you, Per.
Yeah,
sorry, Johan.
Yeah, thank you. No, just in relation to your question. Yes, I think there would be a lot of benefit in if the different basic assessments could converge on a common metrics. And given that ATAT is in its, I would say, in its final stages of elaboration, I think that it would be worthwhile to really look at the merits of this methodology. Of course, it is, as Rui has indicated, it covers very interesting aspects in relation to pressure on biodiversity. It has other shortcomings. There is not the perfect indicator that would cover everything. That is very clear. So mitigation measures are not included. The persistence of the pesticide in the environment is not included. So I think, of course, it can be improved. But apart from that, I think we would very strongly encourage also the scientific community to have an eye on what comes out of this global process, and to check whether this is worthwhile to incorporating this into your assessments. Because ultimately what we don't want is that we would pass on confusing messages to the farming community that according to one indicator you're improving, but according to another indicator you're not improving. This is certainly something that nobody will understand, and that would undermine the whole effort to improve the performance or to lower the ecotox risks from pesticides. So I think we would be very strongly encouraging you to reach out also to the JRC to learn about this methodology, because at the moment it is not yet fully transparent. The FAO will very soon present an updated methodology paper, which then has to go also through a political approval process. At the end of the day, it will go through different institutions at the UN level, which I don't really have to name here. But it is, we expect, as Zoe has said, by the end of the year, we should have a stable methodology. And that would be, I think, would be a very good basis for you to look at. Thanks.
Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you, Andreas. Per?
Yeah, just a comment for, I think maybe some clarification for many of those who are attending this symposium. I mean, now we're sitting here and comparing the two approaches, the ISAT and what Rui compared, but I think we need to, it's important to remember that what Rui compared is only comparable to that part of our ISAT part dealing with ecotox. So, of course, these two indicators will produce different results simply because the ISAT is also including fate and health as part of the assessment. And Rui's indicator is only looking on ecotox. But of course, it would be interesting to see how it performs on ecotox. I mean, the two indicators performs on ecotox because we have two different approaches in basically standardizing our data. I mean, we use one approach, which is from the, starting from the pesticide load index in Denmark and then modified as was suggested by Noé in Belgium. And you have another way of standardizing, but the fact that you introduce this a minimum floor of 50, of course, will also have an effect on the overall result later on. So, I mean, it would be an extremely interesting exercise to compare the two indicators. But remember, it's only 1/3 of our indicator we can compare it to, because we have two other elements in our indicator, which is not covered by the indicator that Rui presented.
Thanks, Per. And maybe if I can add, maybe it would be interesting to compare, let's say, the three indicators, ISAT, the PLX, ecotox, and the PL, the aggregated one.
Yeah, exactly. That would be a very interesting exercise. So, but I mean, also just to say about collaboration, Johan asked about collaboration. I mean, we have had meeting with Rui and his colleagues several times in recent years. So, and also planning some publications together and so on. So there is collaboration, and this exercise would of course be an obvious one to take on at some stage when all indicators have been finally developed.
Okay, I'm going to allow Johan, and then, because this is starting to look like the final discussion, very interesting, but Jörn is eagerly awaiting with his slides. So Johan, and then we have the last presentation.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, I have one. Well, I had two parts in my question. So the first one was on desirability, and I think we all want to cooperate in order to compare our methods for the fields which there is some overlap, as also explained by Per. The second aspect is about the visibility. So we all make use of the resources which are available, and we bring it together from national resources, parts of our Horizon project. But from the visibility point of view, it would be good that we have more leadership on bringing all those efforts together in order to mitigate that we spend all efforts to separate indicators with a lot of overlap, but working together really. So from that point of view, is there also something which we can expect from the European Commission, from the DG itself, or from the Horizon Europe program, so that allows us to work together with the entire scientific community at the higher scale level?
Andrea, I will pass back again the question to you. My apologies.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think I have to underline, I'm from DG Environment, so we are not formally, we're not the service in charge of developing pesticide indicators in the European Commission. I think this is the responsibility of the FALAs with the DG Sante. So I think I could not really speak on behalf of the Commission to really really structure and to engage on this. But I think it is, in any case, I think what I mentioned earlier, I think it still holds. results, I think we are very strongly encourage the scientific community to reach out to the scientific branch of the Commission, to the JRC, to make sure there are strong links between the different work streams. There is work underway to improve the legally the harmonized risk indicator, which is the only indicator that we have at EU level which has a legal foundation. It has many shortcomings. That is I think pretty much well known, and some of these shortcomings will also be addressed in the ongoing work. But as I also mentioned earlier, I mean, there's the perfect indicator doesn't exist, and it will be very difficult to create one. They all have their specific purposes, and therefore I think this will remain to be an area of further work. I don't know whether colleagues from DG Santo want to step in here but of course there is no obligation. Thanks.
All right, I'm going to go over to Jörn, because actually it will not be a shortcut of this discussion. Jörn is actually going to talk about possible future, I don't know, Jörn, if there are plans, wishes, ambitions for how this tool could be, the indicators in it could be further developed. We saw some current limitations. So I give you, your screen was already there, but it's gone now.
Okay. Now we're here. I hope, can you see it, or?
It's, yeah, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. And now we have to come from the national level back to the field and into the future. So I just have some ideas which I want to present here. The fields where we can use ISAT, the users who will use this and will use ISAT, and some further development we think of. Sorry, no, it's not running. Okay, so ISAT already provides a structured comparison of crop strategies. This was presented by Vera, and I think it can be done in a very good and simple way to compare agronomic strategies for various crops on economic and environmental dimensions. Current implementation demonstrates that different strategies can be evaluated consistently if you're in the same region. And the user feedback, which was presented by Ole, provides clear direction for the next development phase. And this is clearly to transform the tool from a technical functional assessment tool into a practical decision support tool, because some things we have also seen from the user feedback are not very practical. So just to summarize what Ole said, and what was the feedback of the users within support, is that it's a good, friendly, user-friendly basic structure behind that tool. So I think even though in some parts it's not user-friendly, but the overall structure was quite accepted by the users. It has a high level of functionality. And we have shown that with this tool or platform, we can compare different strategies directly under the same assumptions. So the limitations are clearly that the data entry is very time consuming. And one big limitation was that so not all the products were available in product databases that we wanted to enter. So we have the German product database linked in that tool, but of course there's many more products, and that was a big limitation. So we offered, and Vera showed that, the possibility to enter active ingredients, which makes it not very easy to use. And also a big limitation was that for permanent crops like orchards and olives, especially for the costs and greenhouse gas emissions, there was a lot of machinery data missing, and also the procedure of calculating it. We kind of implemented it, doing a lot of assumptions, but this can be clearly improved in future. The interface to other tools was also mentioned by Ole. They are not existing at all. It's also a big problem because there's so many tools out there, so field records or farm management systems, that it's really, there is not one interface, so to implement it is not easy. But one idea is, especially for the crops, so for the plant protection strategies, so there will be a documentation, a digital documentation of the plant protection strategies. And at least in Germany, we plan to have a defined fixed format how to document these pesticide uses. And this could be a first step into an interface to other tools if everyone follows this fixed format. And also missing a bit is clear explanations of the indicator. Training and guidance has to be offered for interpretation of the results. So overall, the broader uptake requires reduced input and a reduced input burden and clear interpretation, not only more indicators and more information. So clearly the user groups are the farmers and advisors in future if the tool is implemented in a way that it can be easily used. So and that's to compare alternative crop protection strategies before you really implement them in the field. They can be used by research and demonstration farms to test IPM scenarios and communicate also trade-offs, or scientific institution to really analyze the IPM scenarios and explore different options, new options. And farmer organizations and cooperatives I put also here, but at the end I dropped the slide, might be interested if ISAT was a tool which is doing benchmarking to support advisory service in a way of benchmarking for small crop groups. But now in my presentation, I did not include a slide, but it's just a development that can go on and implement ISAT as a benchmarking tool. So the broad use of ISAT must improve in data entry. So here we were thinking of also implementing pre-filled default values or default entries for machinery example. If you enter an application that automatically the most common machine or the default machine pops up, that you don't have to select it every time from scratch. So the import option from other tools I've mentioned, and also input checks like application rates, are they reasonable if you enter application rates? The transparency of the indicators is important. So we have to list all the assumptions and clarify the assumptions that are behind the indicator. And maybe we need, of course, to include maybe some short description of each of the indicators that are listed in our result page. So you have some information in non-expert language that everyone can understand. And for interpretation, of course, the tool to visualize the results can be improved. And you still see there's some fields with constructions. There I come back later when we go on field level. But here is also some improvement necessary. And what we're also thinking of including some warning and context information to the results. So as we mentioned, one bottleneck is the pesticide product database that was not existing for Europe. So we implemented the input of active ingredients as a partial interim solutions. And here the user must identify the product and convert the product rates into active ingredient doses. And this, of course, is a big source for errors and discourages also users. So I think if you have something like this, it's a scientist will do it, but I think a farmer It's very time consuming. So we have implemented, I mentioned that, the German product database, so the future workflow, or what is actually implemented if you want to look at German products, you would select a crop, and then it lists the authorized products for that crop. And then the next step, you would select the product, and then it automatically gives you the information on the target organisms, the active ingredients included, and valid dose rates, and fill them in the corresponding field. So this would really reduce wrong entries for manual active ingredient dose conversions. So, but the key requirement is some European product database, which I didn't know that there's something existing like this, but recently we came across the database Homologa. I think it's even worldwide, and I think Vera already has an appointment for tomorrow, so maybe they will go one step further to include such a database. So another thing we want to add to this tool is additional indicators, for example, risk of resistant risk. So repeated mode of actions will increase the selection pressure, and this is what we want to avoid. So the data to calculate such an indicator is basically there. So we have the information on the mode of actions, we know the crop, and if we link a product database, it's probably also easy to enter the target organism, and based on this, it's possible to have an assessment of the resistant risks, and the output could be some categorization of the resistant level or some warnings. So that's not clear yet, but this could be a future additional part. And one important thing also for IPM is the crop sequence, and they are kind of linked to each other, these indices. So if you have a high crop diversity, the risk of resistant, or the resistant risk will probably reduce. So the crop rotation, we have one idea which is will be published soon by a colleague of us, Abdelaziz Hitiyu, and he introduced the crop sequence indicator, CSI, which is based basically on satellite categorizations of the crops, and the data is available on European level, so this could be implemented on European level. And yeah, that's a future work we want to do, and that will add to structural IPM layer beyond pesticide use indicators. And another indicator we could include is the German risk indicator Synops. That was our idea at the beginning of the support project, but then we saw that a lot of data on European level will not be available, and this kind of blew up the task. So we said, okay, we stay with a pesticide load indicator, not looking into the exposure of the different compartments around the field. This is what Synops is doing. And if we want to implement an indicator like this, we need information on the weather data, on the connectivity to the surface water, soil properties, slope, flow paths. But as the time goes on, all of this data is basically available now, and also field boundaries. We have data sets that are available, so that I think in near future also some exposure-based risk assessment approach could be implemented in a tool like this. And this would be would complement the pesticide load indicator, but be more field-specific approach to the risk evaluation. Okay, now we come to the conclusion. So the next step we want to do is, of course, simplify input, improve the presentation of the results, and provide some guidance and training when presenting the results. The product-based workflow is there, and if we have a available product database, we could easily implement that already in the tool. Interfaces to farm management and other tools, that's still an open discussion. But my hope is a bit that at least a part of the pesticides can be conducted as soon as there's a harmonized format for the documentation available, and improve data bases for greenhouse gas emission and costs, especially for the permanent crops. And then what I mentioned last is the crop sequence indicator, environmental risk by exposure, and also resistant risk indicators could be included. And the benchmarking approach I just skipped here. But overall, a broader uptake depends less on adding complexity and more on reducing effort while improving interpretation. Thank you very much. I think that was my presentation. I hope there will be some discussion.
Thank you, Jörn. And yeah, we already had some discussion on the next possible ideas. You presented a lot of ideas for possible future work. Of course, they depend on what Johan said, its desirability, but then there's also feasibility. Will there be projects to do all this work? Looking at the time, Johan, I'm going to give it in like 2 minutes back to you. But here I just want to use the opportunity to highlight 2 additional events that we are doing with the support project. On the 25th of June, we will have another webinar where support, which is organized by support, but whereby other projects are invited. And we will present policy recommendations regarding promoting the uptake of IPM. And then support will have its final event, a conference in Brussels on the 10th of November in Brussels. So 2 things to put into your agenda if you want to learn more about our projects and IPM uptake in Europe. So, and with that, Johan, I give it now to you to close. Either close this webinar or raise some additional points for discussion. It's entirely up to you.
No, I think it's not. I do not have additional questions. Maybe there are from the other attendants some basic questions they want to discuss right now. It could be an option. I think we have a few minutes time for that. I do not see hands raised, so. In that case, I think we can conclude this session. I really thank you all for attending this webinar, especially the speakers. So Vera and Jörn, with all your works on making the ISAT tool, and also the team testing the strategies, making use of the tool. So thanks also from your side to you. Thanks, Rui, for giving us an insight in the developments regarding the ISAT developments. I think it's really insightful that we are aware of those developments at different scale levels. And as you can already expect, I really want to encourage the cooperation in this field, bring together all scientists in Europe, so work on with different purposes on a comparable methodology from a consistent point of view. So from that point of view, I think there's really a lot of work to do, and let's still keep in contact with each other. And if you have any option for or any possibility for further cooperation, please inform us as a support team so we can make use of that. So thanks again for being present, and hopefully we can also see you again in our next webinar on the 25th of June, or also on the final conference in November. Thank you all. Thank you all.